welcome to another episode of Lexitecture, a podcast about words by word nerds and for you. My name is Ryan, and in each episode, my friend Amy and I will be talking about our two favorite words of the week, looking at their origins and history, and generally chatting about how they got to where they are today. If that sounds like your cup of tea, come along for the ride and let's explore the weird and wonderful world of the English language. In today's episode, spell tandem. When I was just entering undergrad, I was going in for an English degree, and the school I went to, Trent University in Peterborough, Ontario, only had one core English course for English majors in first year, so I had a schedule to fill, and I was perusing the booths at the course selection orientation week event, and ended up in the classics section, classical history and classical languages, etc. And it's a fantastic section.
I started off my degree at St Andrews aiming to get a degree in English and classical studies.
Yeah, that's what I ended up doing. I ended up doing my other four courses ended up being classics courses.
Excellent.
And purely because the classics professor, or the Latin professor, it was a gentleman by the name of David Page, who was the most enthusiastic professor about anything I think I've ever had, and he was that enthusiastic about Latin. Something I never thought I would be at all really interested in taking, but he was just so enthusiastic because I was like, well, yeah, how am I supposed to not take this study now?
Yeah.
So I ended up taking 2 years of classical Latin, almost none of which I remember. One of the only things I remember from it, because it sort of leapt out off the page at me, was about towards the end of our first year, we were doing some actual reading and passages and stuff, and the word tandem sort of jumped off the page at me as most of the sort of words that then became English did. It's always easiest to learn those ones and be like, oh, that's kind of cool. That becomes this one. That becomes this one.
Yes.
This was odd because it was fully formed as is. Tandem, exactly as it's been in this ancient classical Latin text. Except in Latin, it means finally or at last. And I was thinking and I've always sort of been thinking this is ridiculous because colloquially, if we do something in tandem, like we are recording this podcast in tandem. Meaning together. Two people or things doing something conjointly and together. And then tandem bicycles, of course.
That's what I think of first.
Yeah, two seats, one behind the other.
Yeah.
But so I was always really puzzled by this and trying to figure out just what was going on with this. And so that's why I chose this word for today. And so I looked up in the OED and a couple etymonline.com and such. And it turns out that it's perfectly natural that I love this word because I love puns. And it's actually in the English language because other people like puns as well. Because,
this is sounding foxy, Ryan.
Yeah. Another, if we were to look up the word finally in our friend Roger, we would find eventually the two-word phrase at length, which is apparently, by all sources that I can find, how this word made the transition from meaning finally, or at last, or at length, to two horses pulling things, one before the other, or at length, which strikes me as crazy. The OED has
the first... Oh my God.
Yeah, right? The OED has the first usage of tandem in English, sort of towards the tail end of the 1700s, but it was clearly used before that because the work that it's used in is called the Classical Dictionary of the Vulgar Tongue. And the definition for tandem is a two-wheeled chaise, buggy, or noddy drawn by two horses, one before the other, that is, at length. And at length is italicized for emphasis. And there was a book, I believe a periodical called Notes and Queries, dated 1850, where it basically talks about, it says, we have a practical pun now naturalized in our language in the word tandem. And so it went from being finally or at length to being literally at length with two horses. And then as time went on, particularly in the 20th century, the uses of tandem exploded outwards. because for the longest time it was strictly about horses and absolutely about one in front of the other. And then it
Now
became
this makes a lot more sense. The bicycle is at length. It's not two person.
exactly. So a tandem bike is sort of just a long bike.
Yeah, yeah.
And there was like tandem garages, or garages that are, instead of the two cars being side by each, they are one in front of the other, or a tandem canoe, or et cetera, et cetera. And then eventually it became used in machinery for two parts operating either in series or in parallel to be working in tandem, and then the figurative uses, and so on and so forth. So yeah, it's a pun word, and that's why we have it.
Ah, Mr. Paulson, I salute you. That is an absolutely cracking choice of a word. I love it.
I was so happy to learn that. It
Yeah,
was
for
fantastic.
sure.
Yeah.
It's great. Oh man. It's this whole showing somebody else your work thing, isn't it? Because last week when I said whatever I said about whatever I said it about, you said, "Oh man, now my word seems like it's not that interesting," and I'm feeling exactly the same thing, having heard about Tandem.
This is the curse of going second in this show.
Yeah, maybe that's right, or perhaps just the curse of going second ever.
Yeah, no, that could be it too.
I'm so happy that Tandem means at length. It's just that's fantastic.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
I absolutely love it. So my word this time round
Yes.
actually comes out of something that you said last time.
Okay.
And I forget the exact context of what we were talking about here, but we talked about the spelling of a word.
All right.
And this is something that I'm interested in generally in language, because when I was an undergrad at St Andrews, I almost by accident, this is in fact very similar to your story. So I started off in a general English first year course that everyone had to take who was going to do an English degree. And they used that as a sort of a show off all our professors, kind of, what do you want to do sort of affair, as well as giving us a general grounding in the stuff they wanted us to know about.
Right.
And one of my most favourite lecturers was a guy called Tony Ashe, and he was white-haired and very softly spoken, and I just totally fell in love with him. And his particular area of expertise was 18th century literature.
Okay.
And I didn't know a great deal about or of 18th century literature. But when I got past those sort of core courses that everybody had to take and I was able to have a bit more choice, I chose Tony Ashe's modules because I wanted to work with him.
Right.
So I ended up studying 18th century literature. And one of the interesting things about 18th century literature is that it's around about the time that spelling began to be a thing.
Yeah, because before it was just all this big cacophony of put letters wherever you want and hope for the
Yes,
best.
this is why you were talking about it. You were talking about thrid.
Yes. That's
And
yeah, right.
yes, and how the lack of a spelling, I suppose, leads to these contractions or inversions or the things that cause words to kind of mutate and grow.
Right.
And so I started to wonder, when did the word spell come to have that particular context, that particular meaning? Because I know that the word spell has been around for a very, very, very long time. So at what point did this newfangled, at that point, the notion of a word only being one particular configuration of letters,
Right.
at some point, someone must have decided to refer to that thing using a word that already existed,
Yeah.
the word spell.
You can lay aside any worries about this not being interesting because I'm stupendously excited about this. This sounds very cool.
And in fact, if you get your OED out and you look up the word spell, the first definition that is given is write or name the letters that form a word in correct sequence.
Okay.
The second definition that is given is a form of words used as a magical charm or incantation. The third definition is given as a short period, as in I want to get away for a spell.
Right.
And the fourth definition that's given is a splinter of wood.
A splinter of wood?
A splinter of wood. That strikes me as certainly the most obscure version. So that's what the OED has to say about it. If, however, you go to Etymology, which is, clearly we spend a lot of our time there.
Right, yeah.
But what you find there, their ordering is different because, they're doing a different thing. That makes sense. However, the etymology of the word spell, here's what it says. Old English spell, quote, story, saying, tale, history, narrative, fable, discourse, command. From Proto-Germanic spellam, and then it gives various other, so Old Saxon, Old Norse, High German, various other places that this word has come from. It then says from around 1200 as an utterance, something said, a statement or remark, meaning set of words with supposed magical or occult powers, incantation, charm, first recorded 1570s, hence any means or cause of enchantment. So, as I suspected, the use of the word spell, as in a magical spell, is much, much older than this idea that there's only one way to spell a word. And then I started to think about the etymology of it meaning essentially a story.
Right.
And what I realised was, as you spell a word, you are telling its story. You are saying how it is. You are, you have a beginning and a middle and an end. And while there is not that sense of I will be hooked and gripped and interested and engaged by this story, it's interesting to think of as spelling as a story.
Absolutely.
However, when you get to the etymology of the sense of the word spell, as in read letter by letter, write or say the letters of, this dates from around 1400. And Etymology says it's apparently a French word that merged with or displaced a native Old English word. Both are from the same Germanic root, but the French word had evolved a different sense. So, the native word is Old English spellian, tell, speak, discourse, talk.
Okay.
But the current senses seem to come from Anglo sense, espeller, mean, signify, explain, interpret.
Oh.
Okay. So, it says in Middle Early English, still to speak, preach, talk, tell. The meaning of form words with proper letters is from about the 1580s. To spell out or to explain something step by step is first recorded in 1940, which is, I feel, much later than I was imagining it.
1940.
Yeah. And Shakespeare has spell someone backwards, meaning to reverse the character of, explain in a contrary sense, portray with determined negativity. So, as I started to read about all these things, I was pretty gripped, because essentially what we have here is we have Roger in action, in real life, whereby all these different, it's almost like a cloud of definitions and different contexts and different meanings. They're all sort of floating around the same thing, bumping into each other, but never quite coming together. And then, of course, the other word that's interesting in this case is the word gospel, which literally means good speaking. It's often translated as the good news.
Yeah.
The gospel is the good news of God.
Mm-hmm.
So to tell a gospel is to tell a good story. However, this read letter by letter, write or say the letters of. What has really stuck with me throughout all of this research is this notion of telling a story is something that you do to entertain. Spelling a word is something that you do in order to show that you are correct, in order to prove that you have this knowledge. And when you know something for sure, when it is a fact to you, and even more so when it is a fact that is perhaps not known by everyone, what is the thing you are most likely as a human being to do? If you know something that someone else doesn't know.
Oh, you're going to tell them about it and spell it out to them.
Exactly. So, within the story and the reading letter by letter and the telling, it strikes me that despite the varying differences in the usages of this word, they are in fact all part of the same story. And that is what I particularly enjoyed as I researched the word spell.
That's fantastic.
Oh, thank you. Hey, Roger, what do you say?
Yeah.
Interestingly, when you look up Tandem in the alphabetical index, 2 synonyms are given, and the first is duality. The second is
Duality.
bicycle, and the third is cooperation. So Roger is either unaware of the pun or just doesn't care about it. Let's see which one. So, category 90, duality. We have duality, dualism, double-sidedness, double life, dual personality, split personality, Jekyll and Hyde, positive and negative, yin and yang, polarity, dyad, two, juice, duo, twain, partnership, couple, Darby and Joan, Jack and Jill, Romeo and Juliet, brace, pair, couple, doublets, twins, Castor and Pollux, Gemini, Siamese twins, identical twins, Tweedledum and Tweedledee, yoke, span, double file, couplet, distich, double harness, twosome, two-hander, dual, duet, tandem, two-seater, biped, bivalve, genus, double whammy, dual, dualistic, dyadic, binary, binomial, bilateral, bicameral, twin, biparious, bisexual, double-barreled, duplex, double-paired, coupled, conjugate, binate, two abreast, 2 by 2, in twos, both in pairs, tete-a-tete, à deux, double-sided, double-edged, bipartisan, amphibious, ambidextrous, double, bifocal, biform, two-dimensional, two-faced, dihedral, or bihedral. And finally, pair, couple, match, bracket, yoke, mate, pair off. Wow, you could have some incredible automatic correction going on in your essay if you decided to just plug that guy into your thesaurus.
And just randomly generate different synonyms, quote-unquote synonyms for it.
Yeah, the bisexual bicycle.
The idea of a bisexual double-barreled duplex sounds really interesting to throw into an essay sometime.
Very much so. Okie doke. Spell.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Spell, I suppose, as you would imagine, given what we were talking about, spell has a much, much longer list. It belongs in far more categories.
Oh, I bet.
So let's just stick with this one. We have first, period, influence, predict, mean, interpret, imply, indicate, to spell, instrument, malediction, to spell out, specify, decipher, to speak plainly.
There's a lot of stuff. Malediction is interesting.
That's the one that I was going to go to. I was going to say the next time someone asks me how to spell a word, I may feel like asking them if they want a good spell or an evil spell.
I like that.
How great would it be if words had good spellings and evil spellings?
Evil spellings. That's pretty great.
Oh, I really want some evil spellings.
From now on, nothing is misspelled. It's simply evil spelled.
It's just evil spelled.
And that's it for this episode of Lexitecture. Thanks for listening, and if you enjoyed what you heard, please give us a rating and review on iTunes, and be sure to tell all your word nerd friends about us too. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter by searching Lexitecture, Lexitecture. And if you'd like to get in touch with us about the things we talked about this episode, you can send us an email at words@lexitecture.com. Special thanks to the Joy Drops for our theme music, and we'll talk to you again next week.